Welcome back to Bible Quizzes. We got another quiz on the book of Genesis today. Let's get started. 1. Who was the first person created by God? Noah, Adam, Moses, or Abraham? Adam, Genesis 2:7. Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. 2. On which day did God create the sun, moon, and stars? Second, fourth, third, or fifth? Fourth, Genesis 1:16-19. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars, and there was evening and there was morning the fourth day. 3. What was the name of the garden where Adam and Eve lived? Canaan, Gethsemane, Eden, or Bethel? Eden, Genesis 2:8. Now the Lord God had planted a garden in the east in Eden, and there he put the man he had formed. 4. Who was the first child born in the Bible? Seth, Cain, Abel, or Enosh? Cain, Genesis 4:1. Adam made love to his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. 5. How many people entered Noah's Ark? 4, 8, 6, or 10? Eight. Genesis 7:13. On that very day, Noah and his sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth, together with his wife and the wives of his 3 sons, entered the ark. 6. What was the name of Abraham's father? Nahor, Haran, Terah, or Peleg? Terah, Genesis 11:26. After Terah had lived 70 years, he became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. 7. Who was the first person to get drunk in the Bible? Lot, Noah, Abraham, or Isaac? Noah, Genesis 9:21. When he drank some of its wine, he became drunk and lay uncovered inside his tent. 8. What city did Cain build? Nod, Enoch, Ur, or Babel? Enoch, Genesis 4:17. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch. And he builded a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. 9. Who was the first murderer in the Bible? Cain, Lamech, Esau, or Eliphaz? Cain, Genesis 4:8. Now Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let's go out to the field." While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. 10. What was the sign of God's covenant with Noah? Star, rainbow, dove, or cloud? A rainbow, Genesis 9:13. I've set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. 11. What was the Tower of Babel built for? To worship God, to be a fortress, to reach the heavens, or to store grain? To reach the heavens. Genesis 11:4. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves." 12. What was the name of Abraham's wife? Hagar, Rebekah, Sarai, or Rachel? Sarai. Genesis 11:29. Abram and Nahor both married. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai. 13. What city did God destroy with fire and brimstone because of its wickedness? Nineveh, Babylon, Sodom, or Jericho? Sodom. Genesis 19:24. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. 14. Who was Abraham's firstborn son? Esau, Ishmael, Isaac, or Jacob? Ishmael. Genesis 16:15. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born. 15. What did Esau sell to Jacob for a bowl of stew? His land, his birthright, his sword, or his blessing? His birthright. Genesis 25:33-34. So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. 16. What animal did God provide as a substitute for Isaac when Abraham was about to sacrifice him? A lamb, goat, bull, or ram? Ram. Genesis 22:13. Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. 17. Who was Isaac's wife? Rachel, Rebekah, Leah, or Tamar? Rebekah. Genesis 24:67. Isaac brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he married Rebekah. 18. What did Jacob see in his dream at Bethel? A ladder reaching to heaven. Genesis 28:12. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching to heaven. 19. What were the names of Isaac's twin sons? Jacob and Esau, Cain and Abel, Joseph and Benjamin, or Ephraim and Manasseh? Jacob and Esau. Genesis 25:24-25. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. 20. What new name did God give to Jacob? Israel, Judah, Jericho, or Hazor? Israel. Genesis 32:28. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." 21. Who was Jacob's favorite son? Reuben, Judah, Joseph, or Simeon? Joseph. Genesis 37:3. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age. 22. What special gift did Jacob give to Joseph? A sword, a ring, a coat, or pearls? coat. Genesis 37:3, and he made an ornate robe for him. 23. Who was Joseph sold to in Egypt? Pharaoh, Laban, Potiphar, or Jethro? Potiphar. Genesis 39:1. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, bought him. 24. What did Joseph's brothers do to him out of jealousy? Killed him, hid him in a cave, sold him into slavery, or exiled him? Sold him into slavery. Genesis 37:28. So, when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver. 25. What did Pharaoh dream about that Joseph interpreted? 7 fat cows and 7 thin cows, 7 golden idols, 7 falling stars, or 7 snakes? Seven fat cows and 7 thin cows. Genesis 41:17-18. In my dream, I was standing on the bank of the Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they grazed among the reeds. 26. What position did Pharaoh give Joseph after he interpreted the dream? General of the army, high priest, governor of Egypt, or royal advisor? Governor of Egypt. Genesis 41:41. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. 27. What was the name of Joseph's Egyptian wife? Asenath, Leah, Zipporah, or Hagar? Asenath. Genesis 41:45. Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zaphenath Paneah and gave him Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, to be his wife. 28. What was the name of Joseph's firstborn son? Manasseh, Reuben, Benjamin, or Ephraim? Manasseh. Genesis 41:51. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh and said, It's because God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. 29. Why was Joseph thrown into prison in Egypt? He was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife. Genesis 39:19-20. When his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, This is how your slave treated me. He burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison. 30. How many years of famine did Joseph predict from Pharaoh's dream? 3, 7, 5, or 8? Genesis 41:30. But 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. 31. Who came to Egypt by grain during the famine? Moses and Aaron, the Midianites, Joseph's brothers, or the Moabites? Joseph's brothers. Genesis 42:3. Then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. 32. Which brother did Joseph keep as a prisoner while the others returned home? Dan, Simeon, Reuben, or Benjamin? Simeon. Genesis 42:24. He had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes. 33. What did Joseph put in Benjamin's sack to test his brothers? Gold coins, a golden chain, a silver cup, or Pharaoh's ring? Silver cup. Genesis 44:2. Then put my cup, the silver one, in the mouth of the youngest one's sack. 34. How did Joseph reveal himself to his brothers? He wrote them a letter, sent them back to Canaan, removed his Egyptian clothing, or wept and told them directly? He wept and told them directly. Genesis 45:1-3. Then Joseph could no longer control himself. I am Joseph. Is my father still living? 35. Who was Joseph's father? Abraham, Jacob, Isaac, or Laban? Jacob. Genesis 37:3. Now Israel, Jacob, loved Joseph more than any of his other sons. 36. What did God use to communicate with Jacob in his dream? A bush, fire, a ladder, or a storm? The ladder. Genesis 28:12. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth, with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. 37. Who was Abraham's nephew who was rescued by Abraham after being captured? Lot, Laban, Nahor, or Isaac? Lot. Genesis 14:12. They also carried off Abram's nephew Lot and his possessions, since he was living in Sodom. 38. Which one of Joseph's brothers wanted to save him from the pit? Judah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, or Reuben? Reuben. Genesis 37:21. When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. 39. How many of Jacob's family members moved to Egypt? 50, 100, 70, or 120? Genesis 46:27. With the two sons who had been born to Joseph in Egypt, the members of Jacob's family, which went to Egypt, were 70 in all. 40. What land in Egypt did Pharaoh give to Jacob's family? Sinai, Gilead, Goshen, or Jericho? Goshen. Genesis 47:6. The land of Egypt is before you. Let your father and brothers settle in the best part of the land. Let them live in Goshen. 41. How long did Jacob live in Egypt before he died? 10 years, 20 years, 17 years, or 25 years? "17 years. Genesis 47:28. Jacob lived in Egypt 17 years. 42. What did Jacob ask his sons to do with his body after he died? Bury him in Egypt, bury him in Canaan, cremate him, or keep his body in a tomb in Goshen? Bury him in Canaan. Genesis 49:29-30. Bury me with my fathers in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite. 43. Who blessed Joseph's son before Jacob died? Reuben, Pharaoh, Levi, or Jacob? Jacob, Genesis 48:9, and Israel said, "Bring them to me so I may bless them." 44. How old was Joseph when he died? 90, 110, 100, or 120? (110). Genesis 50:26. So Joseph died at the age of 110. 45. What did Joseph tell his brothers about their actions? It was not you who sent me here, but God. Genesis 45:8. So then, it was not you who sent me here, but God. 46. Who was the father of Nimrod, the mighty hunter? Ham, Shem, Cush, or Japheth? Cush. Genesis 10:8. Cush was the father of Nimrod, who became a mighty warrior on the earth. 47. Who was Noah's grandfather? Enoch, Methuselah, Jared, or Lamech? Methuselah. Genesis 5:25-29. When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he became the father of Lamech. After Noah was born, Lamech said, "He will comfort us in the labor and painful toil of our hands." 48. What was the name of Joseph's mother? Leah, Zilpah, Bilhah, or Rachel? Rachel. Genesis 30:22-24. Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and enabled her to conceive. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son and said, "God has taken away my disgrace." She named him Joseph. 49. Who was Rebekah's brother? Nahor, Haran, Bethuel, or Laban? Laban. Genesis 24:29. Now Rebekah had a brother named Laban, and he hurried out to the man at the spring. 50. Who was the king that took Sarah into his household, thinking she was Abraham's sister? Pharaoh, Melchizedek, Abimelech, or Sihon? Abimelech. Genesis 22. And there Abraham said of his wife Sarah, "She's my sister." Then Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent for Sarah and took her. 51. What mountain did Noah's Ark rest on? Mount Sinai, Mount Moriah, Mount Ararat, or Mount Carmel? Mount Ararat. Genesis 8:4. On the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. 52. What was the first bird Noah sent out from the ark? Dove, sparrow, raven, or eagle? Raven. Genesis 8:7. He sent out a raven, and it kept flying back and forth until the water had dried up from the earth. 53. How old was Isaac when he married Rebekah? 30, 50, 40, or 60? Genesis 25:20. Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah. 54. What did Joseph say before he died? God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of his land. Genesis 50:24. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land he promised an oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. 55. How many kings fought in the battle where Lot was taken captive? 4, 9, 5, or 10? 9. Genesis 14:9. Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of Goyim, Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. 56. Who was the first person in the Bible recorded as being a priest of God Most High? Aaron, Jethro, Melchizedek, or Eli? Melchizedek. Genesis 14:18. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out of bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High. 57. What was a sign of God's covenant with Abraham? Rainbow, circumcision, fire pot, or a staff? Circumcision. Genesis 17:10. This is my covenant with you and your descendants after you, the covenant you are to keep. Every male among you shall be circumcised. 58. How many camels did Abraham's servant take when seeking a wife for Isaac? 5, 20, 10, or 23? Genesis 24:10. Then the servant left, taking with them 10 of his master's camels loaded with all kinds of good things from his master. 59. What did Rachel steal from her father Laban? His livestock, his idols, his silver, or his staff? His idols. Genesis 31:19. When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household gods. 60. Who was Jacob's firstborn son? Joseph, Reuben, Judah, or Levi? Reuben. Genesis 29:32. Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben. 61. What was the original name of Bethel? Luz, Salem, Shechem, or Hebron? Luz. Genesis 28:19. He called that place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. 62. How many years did Jacob work for Laban before marrying Rachel? 5, 14, 7, or 20? Genesis 29:27. Finish this daughter's bridal week, then we will give you the younger one also, in return for another 7 years of work. 63. What was the price for Joseph when he was sold into slavery? 10 shekels, 30 shekels, 20 shekels, or 40 shekels? $20 shekels. Genesis 37:28. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver. 64. How old was Noah when the floodwaters came? 500, 349, 600, or 788? Genesis 7:6. Noah was 600 years old when the floodwaters came on the earth. 65. What was the first thing Noah built after leaving the ark? A house, an altar, a vineyard, or a well? An altar. Genesis 8:20. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. 66. What type of wood was used to build the ark? Oak, gopher, cedar, or acacia? Gopher. Genesis 6:14. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. 67. What was the name of Abraham's chief servant? Eliezer, Ibzan, Abimelech, or Jer? Eliezer. Genesis 15:2. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus? 68. Who was the first person in the Bible to be called a Hebrew? Noah, Abraham, Isaac, or Isaac? Abraham. Genesis 14:13. A man who had escaped came and reported this to Abram the Hebrew. 69. Who was the first person in the Bible recorded as drunk? Adam, Lot, Noah, or Lamech? Noah. Genesis 9:21. When he drank some of its wine, he became drunk and lay uncovered inside his tent. 70. How many sons did Nahor, Abraham's brother, have? 6, 10, 8, or 12? 12. Genesis 22:20-24. Nahor, your brother, has sons. Uz, the firstborn, Buz, his brother, Kemuel, the father of Aram, Kesed, Hasso, Pildash, Jidlaph, and Bethuel. 71. What was the original name of Abraham? Abram, Nahor, Abimelech, or Gallio? Abram. Genesis 17:5. No longer will you be called Abram, your name will be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. 72. What river did Jacob and his family cross before meeting Esau? Nile, Jabbok, Jordan, or Euphrates? Jabbok. Genesis 32:22. That night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. 73. How many pieces of silver did Abraham pay for the burial site of Sarah? 30, 400, 590, or 355? 400. Genesis 23:16. Abraham agreed to Ephron's terms and weighed out for him the price he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver. 74. Who was the first shepherd mentioned in the Bible? Abel, Nimrod, Ishmael, or Cain? Abel. Genesis 4:2. Now Abel kept flocks and Cain worked the soil. 75. How many total people entered Noah's Ark? 4, 8, 6, or 9? 8. Genesis 7:13. On that very day, Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, together with his wife and the wives of his 3 sons, entered the ark. 76. What was the first animal mentioned in the Bible by name? Dove, raven, serpent, or lion? Serpent. Genesis 3:1. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. 77. What was the occupation of Laban? Blacksmith, merchant, tent maker, or shepherd? Shepherd. Genesis 30:31. Jacob replied, You shall not give me anything, but if you will do this one thing for me, I'll go on tending your flocks and watching over them. 78. What did Laban accuse Jacob of stealing? Silver, cattle, idols, or staff? Idols. Genesis 31:30. Now you've gone off because you long to return to your father's household, but why did you steal my gods? 79. Who was Isaac's wife before Rebekah? Tamar, Leah, Bilhah, or Keturah? Keturah. Genesis 25:1. Abraham had taken another wife whose name was Keturah. 80. What was the name of the place where Abraham nearly sacrificed Isaac? Beersheba, Bethel, Moriah, or Sinai? Moriah. Genesis 22:2. Then God said, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I'll tell you about. That's all our questions today. Put your score in the comments below and share this with your friends and family, and we'll see you in the next one.